Cooper Fitch getting ready to release its latest employment index a little bit later today. But in the studio to share the results with us first, we've got the founder and CEO, Trefor Murphy. Thank you, Trefor, for coming in.
Thanks, Brandy.
And for the exclusive sneak peek, always appreciate that. And it is a very interesting read this quarter. You've got a 27% increase in your employment number for Q2 this year over last year. Remind us again, in the world of Cooper Fitch, what the employment number represents and how you calculate it.
Sure. I mean, what we do is we take the cumulative number of jobs by segment that we work on in Cooper Fitch, and then we estimate our position in that market, and then we estimate the number of jobs that the market produces as a direct result of that.
So 27% quarter two over the year before. What does that tell us?
It probably brings most of the Gulf countries back to pre-COVID levels. 27% seems staggering now. I think in quarter one last year we had good recovery certainly in Saudi and most of the UAE. Some of the other Gulf countries were still catching up a little bit. So we're probably seeing a low to middle single digit increase on the overall post-pandemic numbers. So overall extremely positive from an employment point of view.
And if we look quarter on quarter, so if we look how Q2 has been compared to Q1, we've got growth of around 4%, telling us how things have moved in 2022 so far. Yeah. Which has been a very different story than the pandemic. It's been a story of inflation, recessionary concerns. Yep. How are those fears impacting employment here?
So far, they're not. So I understand there's a huge amount of discussion around inflation and what that means. I guess it's a global thing, so it's not like you can move away to another country or another region and not be impacted by it. And probably we are on I'm thinking not as an economist, but looking at it from an employment point of view, that we're probably less impacted by inflation than a lot of countries, particularly Europe, which I've just returned from. So I don't see, it hasn't impacted numbers so far. 4% is very good growth off the previous quarter. Pretty much everything seasonally adjusted is moving ahead. Either mid or double digit or mid to high single digit or early double digit growth.
Which is interesting because you're also, I mean, we've got the numbers, but you also have a wealth of qualitative information as well, don't you? Because you're just talking to people about this all day. Yeah. Is there any sense then with all of the, and as you say, it's talk, the recessionary headlines, the warnings coming out from banks, that employers here are starting to get a little bit more cautious or not at all?
Not at all, so far. It is the summer. We get a lot more moving parts in the summer. A lot of big decision makers travel significantly more in the summertime. I think we'll probably have a better read of that around September timeline when we get back into full swing of things again. But again, I think there's a greater desire for growth based on where we've come from for the last 2 years. That inflation may not impact that in the way maybe sometimes it would have done historically.
Okay, well, let's have a look at what this report tells us in terms of sectors. Your job growth, where are we seeing it and where are we not seeing it?
I guess from a country point of view, we're seeing more in UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait than we've done maybe in Saudi historically. But Saudi's still a very significant number. I think from a function point of view, we're not terribly surprised where we're still seeing strong growth. So the consulting firms are still doing very well. Strategy in the management consulting market is off unprecedented numbers in the region. We're a huge influx of people coming from Europe, particularly to satisfy that demand. Legal profession, exceptionally busy with a huge amount of activity, particularly around M&A activity. And we're also seeing a lot of growth across the technology areas. still all doing very well. Specifically in the UAE, we're seeing really good growth numbers in real estate. And in the banking and financial services sector, we're again seeing better numbers than we've seen in 3 or 4 years coming out of that space.
But if we look at some sectors like HR, you're not seeing the growth.
No, we're seeing smaller, slight contraction, -2%. Probably nothing too significant, but probably again we don't seasonally adjust our numbers. It's summertime, so we're seeing a real number adjustment of -2%. It's very small, but yeah, there's some pockets, but I don't see it being an indicator of anything to be concerned about.
Are companies able to find the talent that they want here in the region?
Typically no, and it's typically nearly always the case. So I always talk about the dynamic nature of the Gulf, and we're always changing the skill set requirement. And we're probably just seeing that now, a continuation of that. There are still people that are really struggling that want to stay in the UAE or have lived here all their lives, are struggling to get jobs, and that's very difficult.
Why are they struggling, Trefor?
I mean, the global skill set, the requirements is always changing. If you're working in business, if you're working in real estate at the moment, and you have typically sold real estate to a particular group or network of people, as the years have progressed over the last 10 years that I've been here, the biggest markets for buyers in real estate across the UAE, as an example, consistently change. There's a huge demand for Chinese-speaking sellers within the real estate market at the moment, because that's where the big growth is in terms of the buy side.
Language aside, is there a suggestion that maybe skill sets aren't keeping up here for those long term in the Gulf?
I think that's a global issue again. I think yes, for sure. So with the developments in say technology is an easy one to explain. Your demands within cloud and how cloud as a sector has developed. Sovereign wealth funds are building their own cloud facilities at the moment, and the need and the requirements and the skills required to do that only exist for organizations or countries that have built other cloud facilities before.
Before we let you go, Trefor, we've got 1 minute left with you. This isn't your annual salary survey, but anecdotally, what are you seeing happen to salaries?
No significant change based on what we've projected at the beginning of the year. Salaries never correlate to inflation. When we have negative inflation or low inflation, it does not mean that you have low or negative salaries. It's just not the way it works. I understand that people are really finding it difficult at the moment. Spending has to be curtailed, etc. But those data sets don't normally correlate in any significant way.
Dubai Eye 103.8.
Join the conversation.